Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Deborah. This is She Wears Boldly. And this is, I know it's going to be an incredible podcast. You have got to listen to this because I don't know what's going to happen, but I just know the universe was against us getting together. Took us a half hour of Zoom, not even letting me in, and a lot of craziness. But we found each other out on the net, and she's from England. How cool is that? So it was a journey to find each other.
Yeah,
So I
but we
just
did it.
really I know this was meant to be, and it was meant for you to hear. And that'll be in the notes too, okay, guys? All right. I want to welcome to She Wears Boldly Jane Johnson, and she is going to tell her story. Just take it away. Go for it.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you. And I'm so glad you managed to find me across the airwaves or wherever they are. Yeah, really pleased to be here. And I'm really excited to share my story and my mission and talk a little bit about what I do and how I help people. So I'm Jane Johnson, as you've introduced. I work for Bright Futures Coaching. My company is Bright Futures Coaching, and I work with parents of teens to help them build stronger connections and stronger relationships and basically make family life easier for parents with
Yeah.
teens. Overall, I started my business. I was a teacher. I was a teacher for almost 3 decades in secondary schools in the UK, and I loved my job. It was incredibly hard work. Love working with teens. Learned an awful lot about
Yeah.
teens doing my job. Um, but in 2023, everything changed massively for me. When my son, my 19-year-old son, sadly took his own life. It came quite out of the blue for us. We didn't know that he was struggling so much. We knew that he'd been diagnosed with mild depression, um, but we had no idea how much he was struggling, and that we just had no inkling that suicide was even on the cards. We didn't realize it was even an option. So it came very much out of the blue, and it made me reconsider so much of what I was doing in life and how much time and energy I was giving to my work, and what I wasn't giving to myself and my family. So that point was a real pivotal moment for me, both personally and professionally, actually. I did carry on teaching for another year and a bit after that. And I have to say, the support I got from my school and the community within the school was absolutely incredible. And so for me, that was the right decision at the time. And I don't regret that, because that support really helped me through those first few very difficult months. Um, but eventually I knew that I needed to leave teaching, and I knew that I needed to do something different. Um, Partly for myself, that I needed a change of direction, but also partly as Leo's legacy. I wanted to do something that would honor Leo's legacy, that would kind of bring something positive out of losing him,
Yeah.
that would actually mean that his death was not completely in vain, and that I could actually do something to help other families and to help teenagers in what is actually a really disconnected world, where I think we are starting to lose connection with each other, and I think for teens that's really difficult to navigate. So yeah, so my business was born out of that, really. And it's been a almost 3 year journey. It's almost 3 years since Leo died, and it's 18 months since I properly started my business. So yeah, it's been a very steep learning curve over the last 3 years or so.
Yeah. Wow. That had to be unbelievably hard
Yeah.
for you.
It, it's I think it's the worst
Can't
thing.
imagine.
Yeah,
I really
it's the
can't.
worst thing you can go through as a parent. Um, but it's helped me so much to have brought something positive from it. And I know people talk about feeling angry in grief, and I think particularly with suicide, there can be a lot of anger and negativity. Um, and I genuinely haven't felt that. And I wanted to channel my grief. I was really determined to channel it into something positive to help others. And I think ultimately that's helped me. That's genuinely helped me, and it's helped me move forward and deal with it really, because it's turned it into something that's not just negative. Because I know ultimately nothing I do, nothing I do is going to bring Leo back. And that realization was it's hard to swallow. But whether I go into a spiral of negativity or turn it into something positive, it's not
Yeah.
going to change what's happened. So for me, turning it into something positive is really the only option. It's the only route.
Yeah, and that can go across the board to anyone that is dealing with grief of any kind. And there's many different kinds of grief, losing a
Yeah.
job, losing a family member, losing a home, just so many things that we grieve about, and we can get stuck there. But
Yeah.
if we don't do what you did, and I think that's why your message is so powerful, is that you're giving hope and you're showing people how to get home. But yeah, okay, I hope you can answer this, but can you give some ways that they can start to work their way out of the grief?
I think one of the things that I found really useful was that view of nothing I do will change what's happened. So I can't
Acceptance.
change what's happened. I can only change, yeah. So for me, that level of acceptance as to what had happened, as devastating as it was. And don't get me wrong, this was not an immediate, this was not weeks, even months in. It took me a long time
Yeah.
to get to acceptance. So I'm not saying that this is ever going to happen quickly. Um, but acceptance was one of the most important things for me. Accepting that what has happened has happened. Um, and then also understanding that, I mean, particularly in our case with suicide, for a long time I kind of questioned what I could have done differently, what I could have changed, what I could have, and I've started to realize that actually I could have done everything differently and the outcome might still have been the same. Um, I found a lot of comfort in people. I get my energy from people. I think that makes me an extrovert. I know people kind of misunderstand introvert and extrovert. Extrovert is about gaining your energy from
Yes.
people. So I've 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 learned that that's where I get my energy from. So another thing that's really helped me is being around people who accept me as well. So another form of acceptance. So being around people who accept what I've been through, I don't make it all about me. Um, I do have a powerful story to tell, but that is not everything of me. I am more than that. I'm more than my story. So I don't make it all about me and I don't make it all about the story. And I also, one thing that I set out to do quite early on was involve other people in the grief journey, because I was very aware that although I'm Leo's mum and I am Leo's only mum, um, my daughter was also dealing with grief. She was grieving her brother, and his friends were dealing with grief. They were grieving their best friend, which I think at the age of 19, your friends they're very much like your family, aren't they? He was at university, so he was living with them.
Yeah.
So I I included people, and having that community who all loved Leo and wanted to kind of honor Leo's life in their own way, that I found really helpful. And it's part of the reason that I love working with young people is their view on grief and their view on how to kind of move forward with and from that is actually quite different to how we do it as adults. And it that helped me massively. Um, because their view is not, well, this is all doom and gloom and dark. Their view was like, well, actually, do you know what? This has happened, and we're going to make his life count, and we are going to make everything count. And I think that's partly what drove me to then go, actually, do you know what? I'm watching them doing that. They did charity events. They had band night to raise money for mental health. They did sea swims. They did all sorts of things, all of which my daughter and I were invited to, which was amazing. They really took my daughter under their wing. But that I found just seeing other people's way of dealing with it, that they were dealing with it in a positive way, was actually quite inspirational to me and helped me to drive forward and find a way that I could honour Leo's memory and his legacy by helping others as well. So yeah, so hopefully, that will help other people going through grief, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being angry or, shutting down even. There were days, and I still have days, where I don't really want to be around people and I just want to be me. But then that force driving me on is that actually my purpose has become stronger and stronger, and that's what now drives me on. So yeah.
Uh, um, you just described the 5 stages of grief, and
Yeah.
it's real.
Yeah.
It really is real. And it's okay
Yeah.
to get stuck for a while in each of those stages. And I think people need to realize they got to cut themselves some slack and give themselves a break because
Yeah.
grief is hard and it shouldn't be easy. It really shouldn't. But something that occurred to me, what would you say to people? And I know we talked about it when we were interviewing, when, how do you encourage people to take that step towards approaching people who are grieving? I know that's very hard for a lot of people. They don't know what to say, so they hesitate or they don't do it because they think they're going to say something wrong. What kind of encouragement do you have for them to, because when you're grieving, you want people to reach out to you. You
Yeah.
really do. Some days you don't, but you lock yourself in those days. But some days you want to be part of living again and feel that connection.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm in a community of grieving parents. I'm in a community of bereaved parents, and it is quite interesting that the different viewpoints and how people do accept help and others coming in. And I know it can feel like treading on eggshells when you're with or you want to help somebody who's grieving, because there is that thought of, I don't know how to help. But I think understanding that you can only do what you feel is right for you. You can't dictate how somebody else is going to accept that. And so that almost removes the kind of right or wrong of how to approach somebody. I mean, certainly my philosophy was always, I'd rather somebody said something than nothing. I actually find it very odd when people just skirt over it and say nothing at all. Or I found it really hard. One person actually, I could see them ahead of me on the street and they actually crossed over the road. Um,
They do that. They
Do
really
not
do.
speak to me. Now, that's their choice, that's their decision. But I thought, gosh, what is it that you're so afraid of that you can't just say to me, I'm really sorry? If that's all you can say to somebody, if you don't know what else to say, just say, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that's happened. Give, reach out, give somebody a hug, message them, say something rather than say
Yeah,
nothing. That would be my message. How they receive it is not within your power, but what you do and not ignoring them is within your power. And I think the other thing to remember is that grief is so incredibly overwhelming, is not to ask how you can help or leave it to them to reach out. Um, I remember
they won't.
somebody
They
came,
won't.
no,
They
because
won't.
it's just so incredibly overwhelming. There is no space to make decisions to say, well, this is what I need, because actually, in that really deep grief, in those really early days, you have no idea what you want or what you need or what would help. It's just what I found really useful. My brother just dropped everything, drove up here. He lives 4 hours away, which probably to you guys in America doesn't seem that far, but in Britain, that's like nearly half the country. So he dropped everything, drove over here, came to stay, and he would just go out and do things like empty the bins or sweep the front path. Somebody brought some flowers, not like a live plant, flowers. And he and my mum and dad came over as well. Him and my mum just went and planted them, just did. They just kind of, they didn't say, would you like us to do that? Would you like us da da da? They just did. Somebody came and left some food for me and just messaged and said, we've left some food on the doorstep. And so, A, reaching out and saying something, and B, doing, rather than saying, is there anything, or let me know if there's anything I can do, because that's not going to happen. You're never going to go, oh yes, I've just thought that would be really useful, etc. No, just, or say, right, I can do this or I can do this, and give them some options.
Right.
But
That's
asking
good.
asking a bereaved person, a grieving person to kind of reach out for help is not gonna not gonna
Yeah.
cut it.
And another thing I believe we talked about on that is to be sympathetic, not overwhelmingly, but just, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
is perfect. Um, just a squeeze of a hand, that kind of thing. And you don't have to
yeah,
make a big deal of it and overdo it for your comfort and the person's comfort. But the
yeah,
other thing is, we need to, and I told you some people I've seen in my life have done this, people who kind of want to stop your grief, and that's not okay.
yeah,
That's probably the worst
yeah,
thing you can do to someone. You can bottle them up for months. So when you do, like, reach for a hand and look at them and say, I'm just sorry, that allows them to grieve. And we need to allow each other to grieve,
yeah,
not say, well, it'll get better or whatever, or
yeah,
just, oh, well, he had a good life. No, he didn't. you
yeah,
know, even if you're talking to somebody whose parent died and they're 86, it's still grief.
yeah.
And
And I
grief
think that's
needs
an
to be acknowledged, right?
yeah, and I think that's another important point, that obviously for me, this is all in the wrong order. I shouldn't still be here if Leo's not, because he was 19 and I'm 55. He should outlive me, not the other way around. But I don't necessarily look at people who've lost a parent and go, oh, well, that's not grief, or that's not as big, because everybody grieves differently. And
Right.
and I think, you need to acknowledge that. So, I could look and go, oh my gosh, well, I had 19 years with Leo, whereas somebody else might have lost a child who's much, much younger. You think, gosh, but everybody deals with grief differently. And I don't think there's not necessarily a hierarchy. And I know some people do have a view on this, and I know some people are of the view, well, an elderly person has lived their life,
Yeah.
etc. But that doesn't mean the grief isn't any deeper or
Yeah.
harder. Um, you
Maybe
know,
more understandable. Yeah,
yes,
but it's still
yeah,
grief. It's still someone you loved.
yeah. It's still grief. It's still grief. And it may fade sooner because I think naturally in our minds, when somebody dies older, you have that knowledge that at some point in your
Yeah.
life that person is going to pass away. So it's almost like your brain prepares for it in a slightly different way. I think when it's unexpected, when it's a partner or a child, even a baby, a sibling, um, that does hit differently. I don't think anybody would deny that that does hit differently, but that doesn't mean the grief isn't as, that doesn't mean the grief is different. It just means that it might,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I think there's a certain element of preparation when it's in the natural order. There's a certain element of preparation when it's out of that natural order. It can be more traumatic. So you've got the trauma, but I think the grief underlying that trauma, grief is grief.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not saying this is equal, but it hurts just as much. Like,
Yeah,
I just lost
yeah,
my dog of many years, and um, it was first my granddaughter's dog, and we were holding each other crying at Christmas. But to get that connection and that grief out. And as I'm
yeah,
not saying a dog's as important as a person, but to some people, they are their people.
yeah,
What I'm saying is grief of any kind is allowed in the
yeah.
way you have to deal with it. I agree with you totally there. We can't write how the way other people grieve or for what they grieve for.
No, and I think when you talked earlier about different sorts of grief, grief takes so many different forms. And it's like some people cope better with certain situations than others. Some people cope better in an emergency than others. Some people cope better with flying than others. The way our brains are made up, there's no right or wrong way to do it. And there's no rule book that says, well, this kind of grief has got to be more serious and more severe than this kind of grief. And we're all individuals. And that's what makes us interesting as human beings, that we're all individuals. And the way we perceive things and the way we deal with things is is going to be different. And it depends on so many different factors. So many different factors. I mean, I feel very lucky that I've got my daughter and we've got a really strong bond. But equally, I know parents who've lost a child and it might be their only child, or it's not their only child, but they actually don't have much contact with their other children.
Yeah.
And so there's that again. We're in, you could say, well, you're all bereaved parents, but actually, even then, we're in different situations. It's a different scenario. So it is, I mean, it's a world, obviously, I never expected to be in, I never wanted to be in. Um, but it's interesting and it's opened my eyes to lots of different things. I mean, it's led me down a really interesting path and seeing things from a very different perspective and seeing teens from a very different point of view as well. But yeah, I don't think you can make any rules for grief and say, well, this is how it should be done and this is how long. I mean, that's another thing, isn't it? How long should you grieve for? How long? is it
It's
acceptable?
personal.
You know, but I will grieve for the rest of my life for Leo. I will
Yeah.
grieve for the rest of my life. Somebody described it to me as a hole, and the hole never changes shape. The hole is always going to be there, but what happens is that things grow around it. So, um, flowers, trees, etc. If you imagine a volcanic crater, that volcanic crater doesn't change, but things grow around it, vegetation grows around it.
Yeah.
And I think for humans, your people, your life, things grow around it, but that grief will always be there. So I think that's quite a good way of looking at it. And for me, the more I can grow around it, the more I can invest in positive things to put around that hole, the easier it is to manage. But I know deep down that it will never go away. It will always be there. And there are moments where it just looks like a huge, great big hole again. But then there are other moments where I can see it with a softer edge and I can see it with a slightly different perspective. Like I'm talking to you now about it, and I could be having a very similar conversation a week ago, and I'd be absolutely floods of tears, and today I'm not. And I find that
Mm.
interesting that I can have the same conversation. Some days I can look at photos of Leo
Yeah.
and with joy and with pride or with happiness. And other times I look at them and I'm absolute floods of tears. It's so weird, isn't it? How we're human emotions
Yeah.
dictate like our actions sometimes.
Yeah. Something else that's occurred to me that let's say you have relative who's very sick or a friend or elderly and very sick and die, you can actually have happiness for them that they're not in pain and agony anymore, along with horrible grief for yourself because they're not with you anymore. Like you said, grief is a very multi thing.
Facet.
It's not
Yeah,
just one
yeah.
emotion. And it's
No,
okay to
definitely
have it
not.
all.
Yeah,
You can feel happy for
definitely
them,
not.
but actually sorry for yourself. They
Yeah,
know, they're not suffering, but you still can have grief. And that's okay. It's not being selfish.
yeah,
It's being human.
yeah. And I think what I've learned as well is that emotions can live alongside each other.
Yeah.
So one does not cancel out the other.
Mhm.
And and when the work that I do with parents, parenting a teen can be quite hard, quite frustrating. And but it's entirely possible to be proud of your teen and also frustrated at the same time. Um, or angry, but then something makes you laugh. And equally, I think with grief and joy can sit together and they're not mutually exclusive. So there are days where I just feel like absolute joy at some of the things that Leo gave us, and then the next minute, absolute devastation that he's no longer here, and vice versa. You know, things that he said will make me laugh. Seeing a photo or a memory will make me smile. And that's in the midst of devastating grief. So I think understanding that those emotions work together and don't necessarily cancel each other out. And like you mentioned, the 7 stages of grief. Is it seven? Five? 5 stages. How many stages of grief?
It was fine. Maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
Could be wrong.
Um, but I don't think I'd realised that
I
they
know
don't
there's a
come in.
bunch of them. There's denial and
Yeah,
arguing and
I think it's
acceptance
five.
is the last. Yeah.
Um, but they don't come in a nice, neat order either. It's an
They,
absolute
they, they
roller
jump
coaster.
around.
They
Yeah.
jump around and 1 minute you're in the middle of one and then the next minute you're in the middle of another and then you won't see that one again for another
Right.
few days or weeks. So excuse me. But yes, I mean it's
I'm
a
right.
massive
5 stages. I just looked it up.
5 stages. There we go. I thought it was five.
Denial,
Um,
anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But
Yeah.
you're right. You can get to acceptance and then go back to denial.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not broke. You're not broke if you grieve. You're not broke if you don't get over it fast. You're not broke if you made it to acceptance and then a year later you find a letter or you see something and you go back and go through a couple steps again. You are
Yeah.
not broke. You are human. And it actually means you're a stellar human because you have a heart and you
Yeah.
care.
100%. 100%. And something interesting with my daughter, actually, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this with you, but she um she struggled because she didn't have an outward showing of grief. She felt quite numb and her life just kind of carried on seemingly quite normally. And she felt quite guilty for that because she didn't have this outward, she cried, but she didn't
Yeah.
cry a lot. And she struggled with that a little bit until she started counselling. And her counsellor explained to her that link between the emotional brain and the trauma, that if we experience something that is so traumatic, our brain has a protective mechanism where it literally cuts the trauma part, the memory from the emotional part, so that you're not overwhelmed by the emotion. And that she found that so useful to hear, because I think she just felt that she wasn't normal and felt that she wasn't doing things right, or that she wasn't honoring Leo because she wasn't sad all the time and wasn't upset all the time. But that's another interesting facet, is this
Yeah.
thought that actually grief doesn't always happen immediately. It doesn't always strike as you think straight away. I mean, I know I was numb, I was in shock for a long time. I look back now, but it wasn't. I actually genuinely thought after the first few weeks, I thought I was coping really well. And I was like, I'm doing, I'm functioning, I'm doing okay here. I realized I was just in shock and I was just going through the
Yeah.
motions of day-to-day life, functioning, but that was the point where I was numb and my brain had cut off that emotional part and just gave me enough so that I could function day to day. And that's another thing that I didn't realize was happening at the time, and I've only realized it now with hindsight. But it's taken my daughter probably almost 2 years, 2.5 years to get to that point where she understands why she was feeling numb and things like that. It's massively complex. I mean, I think the human brain is massively complex, but also very clever in the way that it actually helps us and supports us to deal with huge trauma, and then also how it helps us to process the emotions, that there is this roller coaster, that actually you might come back and revisit it and you might start off with the anger, the denial, etc., but then you come to acceptance and then there's just still little drips of those others, but they feel a little bit more, you feel a little bit more able to cope with them because they're coming in smaller drips as you go along. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. It is. I
Yeah.
found it absolutely fascinating learning, because a lot of the reading I've done since Leo died um, is about how the brain works, and particularly for teenagers, how the teen brain works, and what influences there are, and how the teen brain is very, very emotionally led. But it has also led me down a path of understanding my own brain. Um, I don't know if you've heard of the chimp paradox by Professor Steve Peters, but that goes into like neuroscience and how our brain works. Been in very explains it in a very straightforward way. Um, but yeah, I wanted to find out more, so I wanted to learn more about what was going on, and particularly about what was going on for Leo. But it has helped me understand my own brain and understand my own grief. And I think when you understand your emotions better, you can deal with them better. And going back to what
Absolutely.
yeah, going back to one of your earlier questions, what helped me, I think that is one of the things that also helped me get to acceptance quicker, is that I kind of started to understand what was going on in my brain and how I was processing it. And so it helped me get to acceptance earlier.
Well, that's a great lead in for you to explain what you offer and what you do for people.
Yeah, so when I first left teaching, after Leo had died, I actually went out and I was coaching teens. So I started off coaching teens. As I said earlier, I find teens quite energizing, quite inspiring. They have a very different way of looking at the world. And I think they get a really bad rap, teens. Um,
Oh,
yeah, they they get they have quite a bad reputation, but actually their way of looking at the world is quite refreshing if you sit down and actually talk to a group of teenagers. You'll get some quite interesting views. And I just I love that energy, and I love sometimes the simplicity. Not always, because sometimes that simplicity can be quite frustrating to work with. But But yeah, I do. I find the way the team brain works quite fascinating and quite interesting, and those internal struggles that they have. So that was the first thing I did, was I started out almost following on from my teaching. I started out working with groups of teens and working with teens one to one. And then one of the parents of one of the teens I was working with, she said, "Oh, do you work with parents as well?" And I thought, well, yeah, I'd done some retraining as a coach. I'd actually been coaching teachers as part of my role in school, so I was quite heavily involved in staff development. And I thought, well, yeah, I can work with teens and I can work with adults. That's fine. I did tell her I couldn't work with her and her child separately. That would have been a bit of a conflict of interest. But her child decided not to continue, so I started working with this parent, and then another parent came to me, and I actually really enjoyed working with the parents. And so I pivoted my business about 6 to 8 months ago. I pivoted my business to start working more with parents. And it's been such an interesting journey, because you can actually see the patterns that emerge in teenagers when you start working with the parents. Um, and often it stems from that parent-teen relationship. So what I do now, I work with parents one to one, um, and I also support parents. I'm hopefully launching it in March, April this year. I'm going to be doing a parenting course specifically for parents of teens. And my main aim is to help them, A, understand their teen and understand the teen brain. So all the work I've done as a teacher, the work that I was doing one-to-one coaching, and a lot of the research I've done in relation to Leo and me, and how our brains work and process stuff. Um, so I help parents understand where their teen is at, because the teenage brain is still developing. And I think a lot of parents don't realize this, because they're in an adult body. So a teenager outwardly is presenting as an adult, but actually their brain is far less mature, and still very emotionally led. So that rational human part of the brain that we have as adults is hugely underdeveloped. And on top of that, they've got all the hormones flying around, which leads to this push-pull of teens wanting independence, but still really needing the safety and security of their parents and the guidance that they get. But outwardly, they're rejecting that. And I think some parents find that quite hard. So that's what I do with parents, is I help them to understand where their teen is coming from, and help them to understand that actually it's not personal. When your teen says, "I hate you," genuinely, chances are they don't. They don't. It's a moment. They're acting from their emotional brain. Um, and then the other part of it is actually helping parents, and I think this applies to anybody. helping people understand that really they're only in control of their own actions and reactions. And so in a parent-teen relationship, parents still have this concept that they need to control their teens, they need to set boundaries, the teens should follow those boundaries, etc., etc. And they forget that their teenage son or daughter has their own free will, their own ideas, their own views, their own and when you then put that together with that push-pull of independence and rejection of authority and wanting to do their own thing, that's a big old melting pot, that is. That's a big old melting pot. So it's giving parents clarity really over their own circle of control, but also helping them understand what's going on in their teen's brain and to kind of learn not to take it too personally. And ultimately, the aim is to help parents and teens build stronger relationships and stronger bonds that will take them through life. And for me, that stems from obviously having a son who wasn't able to tell me how deeply depressed he was feeling.
Mm.
But really, my work is to build the stronger bonds before that they reach that crisis point. And that's quite important for me. And it's quite important that I distinguish myself. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a qualified therapist, so I don't do therapy. I do coaching. I do coaching with guidance and information. I don't do therapy. So I'm not actually dealing with the mental health sphere, but I'm helping parents to understand, if those things do arise, how can they support, how can they help, how can they regulate themselves in order to be there for their children. So yeah,
To get them the help, yeah, they need.
yeah, yeah. So rather than give the child the help, which I'm not qualified to do, I'm
Yeah.
supporting the parents to support their child, which I think is really, really important. And that parent-teen relationship is such a crucial time. I know when children are young, that's a real crucial time as well. But that parent-teen relationship, when things become difficult, it's teaching parents that they really need to hold on to that rope, no matter how hard their child pulls or wiggles
They
or
can pull
runs,
hard.
that they can pull hard. But I support parents to hold on to that rope so that their child knows that they've got that safety rope there and they've got something that they can hang on to and their parent is going to hold fast. So yeah, and I find it incredibly rewarding. It's such a rewarding area to work in. And it's so meaningful to me as well. It's given me meaning. Um, at a time when, I could have made the choice just to go, no, not going to do this anymore. I don't want to do life, don't want to work with this, don't. But it's given me purpose and it's helped me move forward. So that it has been incredibly rewarding. And I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to that I'm able to do this, that I've been able to pivot and do something so valuable.
I love that you took your experience and created something from it that empowers others and helps them to have those conversations that they need to have with their children
Yeah,
and their teens. Yeah, that's, you know, just so powerful that you turned it around for yourself. And I applaud you for that. I
thank
want to
you.
thank you so much for showing up, and that was a very powerful session. I'm sure there's some tears out there today when they listen to it. So, yes. And it's okay because we just talked about it's okay. Grief
Yeah,
doesn't have a limit, right?
no, no, and emotions are okay, and it's also okay to be okay. If this hasn't brought people to tears, that's also
Absolutely.
okay. I'm the
Yeah,
bereaved mum,
everything's
and
okay.
yeah, it hasn't brought me to tears today. It has previously. I've done previous podcasts where I have literally been in tears on the podcast, but not today. And I could berate myself for that. I could be annoyed, but I'm not.
Right.
that's just not what's come out today. And
None
actually,
of
I
us
feel,
have to be in tears all the time, and none of us have to be happy all the time. We're going to
no,
have a range of emotions because we're human, and
yeah,
some days are easier than other days. And some days, weird little things will trigger, and you're in tears for no reason. But there is a
yeah,
reason,
yeah,
and it's not just because we're emotional women. Men do
no,
it too,
yes,
and that's okay.
yes,
And when you can own that and do that, you don't get sick. You don't get
yeah,
sick inside. And
yeah,
it's okay. It's
yeah.
all
And
okay.
that's another thing that I teach parents is that actually their own self-regulation is really important to enable them to support their children. And it's that thing, is it? Put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. And that's certainly what I've done. I've found a way to put my own oxygen mask on, look after myself, look after my daughter, and then I've been able to go out in the world and start helping others. But I haven't been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't worked on myself first. And I think that's an important point to make, is that you need your own oxygen mask. You need to be in a place, if you want to help others, you need to be in a place where you are okay, and then you can move forward and help others.
Yeah, it's kind of like on the airplane, put the
Yeah,
oxygen on yourself first,
definitely.
then your
Yeah,
family.
yeah, yeah. And
Absolutely.
as a parent, that's not the instinct. As a parent, your instinct is to help your children first. But actually, you can't do that. You can't be the best for somebody else unless you are in the right position. So if you can't breathe, you can't help other people to breathe. So that's I'm going to leave you with that as my kind of parting message, that self-regulation is really important too.
All right. That it's been a very powerful episode, and we may have to come back and have this whole discussion about, what you do. But
Yeah,
I'm glad you shared your story, and I know that's going to touch a lot of people that, not just if they lost a team, but I know some are going to listen that have, and, but also if they lost anybody, those same kind of things it doesn't matter if you lost a 90-year-old mother, it's okay.
yeah.
All right, everybody, this is Dr. Java. This has been She Roars Boldly, and just keep out there roaring strong and spread the word.